Hello, everyone. I'm Drew Goldfarb, joined by Taylor Smith. Today, we're taking a look at some fresh prop bets that are available for the 2019-2020 NBA season. That is projected win totals. We'll each give you our thoughts on 8 teams that we've selected and which side of the line we believe to be the better bet, as well as each pick one team as a wild card of sorts. We're going to begin where all of free agency has begun and gone. A lot of time has been paid attention to the teams in LA, so we might as well start with the Clippers. Taylor, the over-under is set at 55.5 wins for the Los Angeles Clippers in 2019-2020. Are you taking the over or are you taking the under?
I'll take the over. I just think they do have a decent amount of continuity. Montrezl Harrell, Lou Williams, Patrick Beverley, Jermichael Green. They still have Doc Rivers running the show. I think that base will be able to absorb the Kawhi-Paul George tandem pretty easily. 55.5 is a lot. This team won 48 games last year, though, with a lesser roster. It's still the West, but I just believe in the talent. I think Kawhi and George will fit well together, and I'll take the over.
I wrestled with this one more than just about any of the others we're going to get to. Clippers were a playoff team last season. They did the most to improve in the offseason of any of last year's Western Conference playoff teams, I think. Gelling is going to be the key, as you got to with Kawhi Leonard and Paul George needing to play well early for the Clippers to reach their win total potential. Those two had a combined VORP rating last year showing that they're worth 24 wins over replacement level players, 15.5 wins over the top 2 players the Clippers lost over the summer. Don't know they'll quite reach 63.5 wins this year, but I'm going to take the over on 55.5 and expect them to get closer to the 60 mark. Let's go to the other team that plays at the Staples Center. It's kind of weird phrasing it that way, but that's what happens after free agency. The other team at the Staples Center, of course, being the Lakers. They're over-under set at 51.5 wins after they added Anthony Davis. So Taylor, over or under 51.5 for the Lakers?
I thought this was the hardest one just because the Lakers are such an unknown. They won 37 games last season, but their roster was pretty much completely different outside of a handful of guys. I have concerns about the health. LeBron had a big injury last year for the first time. Anthony Davis has injuries every year. DeMarcus Cousins, who they just brought in, has had injuries the last few seasons. It's just not a roster that looks like it's going to be fully healthy all season long. And with the new coach and the lack of continuity, I think they could get off to a slow start pretty, realistically. Obviously, the talent's there. I think they'll be a contender in the long term, but on a regular season win total, I think they might underwhelm a little bit. I could see them being middle, bottom of the Western Conference, maybe like 5 to 6, something like that. So it's scary, but I think I'll take the under on 51.5.
We're going to be scared together because I'm also taking the under for the Lakers. It was challenging because the Lakers should be so much better this season than last season. LeBron James should be healthy. Of course, they had Anthony Davis in the offseason. Problem for me comes down to chemistry. It's something that we discussed also with the Clippers, but when it comes to the Lakers, if LeBron and AD don't mesh immediately, and it's likely going to take at least a little bit of time like it did for LeBron down in Miami a few years back, they're not going to be a ton better in the early stages. They've got a new head coach, like you mentioned, Frank Vogel taking over for Luke Walton. That might take a little getting used to as well. And if they start the first quarter of the year 8-12, which is not a crazy or mind-blowing idea, they'd have to go 44-18 the rest of the way to get to 52 wins. I can definitely see that first part happening where they'd be right around a 500 team for the first 20 games, but I definitely don't see them winning 44 of their last, whatever that is, 50, 62. The rest of the way there to get to the 52 wins. They're going to be a very good team, but I don't think it's going to be quickly enough, so I'm going to take the under as well. Milwaukee Bucks, the best team in the NBA a year ago. Their over-under is set at 54.5 wins. They got to 60 a year ago. Taylor, over-under 54.5 for Milwaukee in 2019-20.
I'm taking the over. Malcolm Brogdon's the only real loss. It's a big loss, but the talent's still there. They still have the MVP. Chris Middleton's back. Brook Lopez is back. They just re-signed Eric Bledsoe. Another year under Mike Budenholzer, I think they'll be, more acclimated to what he's doing. And the Eastern Conference as a whole is just so underwhelming once you get past the first 3 or 4 teams that they should just feast on the bottom feeders. They were the best team in the NBA for a reason last year. 54.5 is not high enough. I'll take the over.
I'm also taking the over on Milwaukee. Indiana's the biggest and probably only threat to Milwaukee in their division. Bucks managed 60 wins a year ago. They were 14-2 against the Central, 26-10 against the rest of the Eastern Conference. Even if the in-division mark comes down a bit because of the Pacers, the East is no better than it was a year ago as a whole. Milwaukee could lose 5 extra games this year compared to last year, and they'd still cover the over. So I think this one's pretty much a no-brainer in my mind. The Bucks will top 54.5 wins this season. Philadelphia 76ers, their over-under is set just behind Milwaukee's 53.5 wins for them. Can the Sixers kind of challenge the Bucks there as one of the top teams, or as the top team in the Eastern Conference?
They should definitely. I don't really see any reason they should be anything less than a 2 seed unless Joel Embiid gets hurt or something. I'm taking the over again here. They lost Jimmy Butler and J.J. Redick. Not ideal, but they did well replacing him with Josh Richardson and Al Horford. I'm curious about how that's going to work with Horford and Embiid because they're both basically centers, but Horford can stretch the floor a little bit. I don't think they have good depth at all. I think they're going to be active on the buyout market, but still the East. They still won 51 games a season ago. Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid are a year older. I imagine that can't hurt. So 53.5, I believe. Yeah, that's too low. I'll take the over.
Yeah, this one was easy for me. I'm taking the over on this. The Sixers were 51-31 last season, and they're a different team this year, like with the players you mentioned being replaced, but I don't think they're going to be any worse than they were a year ago. They should be better. The Toronto Raptors will be worse than they were last year. That should help Philly have a better in-division record. They were 8-8 a year ago. If they go 11-5 against the likes of Toronto, Boston, Brooklyn, and the Knicks, and everything else just stays the same, they hit the over. I imagine they're going to get better against every other team as well. They may not hit 11-5, but they're going to be better against the rest of the East than they were a year ago too. Over, they're going to top 54. They're going to hit 54 or up. They're going to top 55. They could, I don't think they're going to hit 60, but they could be in that 57, 58 kind of range this year. Let's get to the Raptors. They're the reigning defending NBA champions. They brought Canada its first ever NBA title, and they brought Toronto a championship, which is something the Toronto Maple Leafs haven't been able to do in over 50 years. The over-under for wins after the players they've lost this summer, just 45.5 wins for Toronto. Taylor, over-under 45.5 wins for the reigning NBA champs.
This is really hard as well. Danny Green and Kawhi Leonard, I don't know if they're worth 13 wins. They won 58 games last season. This is just so tough. They didn't really add anybody. Stanley Johnson is a fine defender, but he's obviously not anywhere close to Kawhi offensively. I don't know who's going to score for this team. Kyle Lowry is getting older. Pascal Siakam, I guess, can score, but he doesn't seem like a guy that's going to come down and get buckets every time down the floor. I still think 45.5 is low, though, for a team like this. They still have most of the same players aside from the ones they lost. It's still a team that just won the title. It's still the Eastern Conference, which is the main thing. So I think I'll take the over just on the lack of strength in the conference.
This would be quite the fall from 58 wins in the number 2 seed to an over-under of just 45.5. For the sake of comparison, because this is how I had to go about doing this, Indiana got 48 wins a year ago. Boston had 49. Brooklyn and Orlando each had 42 to be those last couple of teams in the playoffs. All 4 of them, obviously, playoff teams last season. Atlantic Division had 4 playoff teams last year. Toronto was a combined 12-4 against the other 3. And the Knicks, they were 22-8 against the Western Conference, which was a ridiculously good mark. Without Kawhi Leonard or Danny Green, this year's Raptors team likely to take a bit of a tumble. May still make the playoffs, but I had to go about this. I think they're likely to be one of the last ones to qualify in the East. Philly, Boston, Milwaukee, Indiana, and maybe Brooklyn will be better. In the East, being the 6th seed means somewhere right around 45 wins. So the odds makers did really good making this one ridiculously difficult. I'm going to take the under, and the only reason I'm doing that is because I think it's more likely that the Raptors finish as a 500 team than get home court for round 1. So that would basically put them in the I think they'd be a bit better than Orlando was a year ago, for instance. But I think it's more likely they're there than competing for the 3, 4, maybe even 5 mark in the Eastern Conference. So for that reason, I am taking Toronto to hit the under. They lost a lot this past summer. So, but who knows? I that is like one of the ones we've gone through so far that I would not take that bet, because I think that, like I said, 45 is like right around the spot that I think they'll hit. So the odds makers are they were really good on that one. Golden State Warriors, the other team that was in the NBA Finals a year ago, or a few months ago from the time we're recording this. Over under for them, also a dramatic shift from 1 year ago. 47.5 wins for Golden State. So Taylor, over under on the reigning Western Conference champions at 47.5.
This is just like Toronto in that it's scary enough to where I don't think I'd actually bet on it. But, you know, nobody lost more than Golden State. They lost Kevin Durant. They lost Klay Thompson to injury, and they lost to Marcus Cousins, you know, and Andre Iguodala and Sean Livingston and Quinn Cook. It's pretty much an entirely new team around Draymond and Steph. Like with the Lakers, I imagine that'll take some time. There's just a lack of talent on this team. Like, you look at the bench, you got Alec Burks, Glenn Robinson III, Kevon Looney, and Omari Spellman. I don't see this team being very good. I mean, I think they could still sneak into a playoff spot just because they still have Curry. Steve Kerr is, we think, a good coach. I guess we'll see now what he's really made of. But 47.5 isn't a ton for the Western Conference, but it is still the West. I think I'm going to take the under, but I could see a case either way. I'm leaning under, but it's a toss-up to me.
Allow me to make the case the other way then. Golden State lost more pieces than Toronto, but they had more to begin with. Stephen Curry will keep the Warriors at least competitive in their first season in their new arena. The division, though, just got a whole lot tougher with the Clippers and the Lakers making their offseason moves. That's what's really going to be difficult for them. Without Durant or Iguodala or Cousins, and with Klay Thompson out until probably March at least, I've been seeing March, maybe April for him. It's hard to imagine Steph keeping Golden State too crazy competitive. GM Bob Myers did say this week, at the time of recording, that they're not just going to flip D'Angelo Russell. That's a positive. Just gotten him in the sign and trade deal that sent Durant to Brooklyn. On top of that, the West 8 seed a year ago, that would be the Clippers, won 48 games last year. Lakers likely take a spot away from someone to make the playoffs, and who knows if a team like New Orleans might try to make a run in the West, make a surprise, maybe a little bit earlier than anticipated. I think the team, though, that's obviously losing their playoff spot from a year ago is going to be Oklahoma City. This is a sweated out pick regardless of which direction you go on it. I think Golden State sneaks into the playoffs. They might be the 7 seed, more likely to be an 8 seed. An 8 seed a year ago is 48 wins in the West. So I'm going to say that they barely get over 47.5. I think 50 is kind of a cap, but I think the low could be 40. So I agree with you. This, like Toronto, do not place a bet on it either way. Way too risky. You're going to be sweating from March 1st until the end of the season in April. But I'm going to take the over on it. So we're split on the two reigning conference champions. Let's go to a team that a lot of people, including us, think might be in line for a really big season. That's the Utah Jazz. Their over-under is set at a whopping 52.5 wins this season. So the Jazz, a team that we and a lot of others like as maybe a team to challenge in the West, over-under 52.5 wins this season.
This looks like an easy one to me. I take the over here. This team won 50 games a season ago after getting off to a bad start. They were 17-19 at one point. They've arguably had as good an offseason as anyone outside of a major market. Adding Mike Conley to the backcourt's huge. That kind of takes some pressure off Donovan Mitchell. Ed Davis is a nice backup center. You know, they lost Derek Favors, but Bojan Bogdanovic adds more shooting to them. Donovan Mitchell entering year 3, I think he's due for a bit of a leap. If Utah can avoid a bad start like they haven't been able to do the last couple seasons, I think they should breeze by this. That's an easy over, I think.
I'm taking the over as well. 4 teams in the Western Conference last year had over 52.5 wins. Only Milwaukee and Toronto, by the way, did so in the East. Utah was 50-32, as you mentioned last year. So looking for 3 more wins with the offseason they had is not a stretch by any means. Mike Conley's acquisition from Memphis is huge. I agree with you. Signing Bogdanovic is big. Picking them to get at least 53 wins would be picking them to get home court for round 1. I don't think that's making some kind of giant, like, crystal ball kind of prediction. I think it's pretty obvious they should at least be competing for that. So They were 0-4 against Oklahoma City last year, by the way. Correcting that to 3-1 this year, which seems likely with all that the Thunder have lost, would give them 53 wins. Keep everything else the same, go 3-1 against the Thunder, and they hit 53 wins and pay over. It's easy. I'm taking the over on this one as well. Let's talk about your team. Houston Rockets. Over-under set at 51.5 wins. So, are you taking the over or are you taking the under in your Rockets?
I was kind of surprised this was as low as it is. I get it. There are a lot of question marks about how Russell Westbrook's going to fit with this team. But we've seen this team win more than this 3 years in a row. 55 games in 2017, 65 games 2 years ago. They won 53 games this past season after getting off to a horrible start. James Harden, I assume, will still be an MVP caliber player. Russell Westbrook, I think, is an upgrade over Chris Paul on a macro level. It remains to be seen how he fits with Harden. They haven't played together in 6 years. Both players have changed quite a bit since then, but the rest of the team is the same. Clint Capella's still here. PJ Tucker's still here. Eric Gordon, etc. The West is tougher now. I think that may be a reason why this might be a lower total than I would have expected, but just based on talent, I don't see why this team couldn't be among the top in the West again. So 51.5 is too low. I will take the over, and I'm not being a homer on that.
Oh, no, you're definitely not, because I'm taking the over as well. Houston made a big play with that Russell Westbrook-Chris Paul deal. Golden State seems to be on their way down, so they might have hope yet to be the team to be able to take advantage of that this year. 53 wins a year ago, as you mentioned. That's despite going to 10-6 against other Southwest Division teams. Southwest Division might be the only one in the West to not have gotten significantly tougher this offseason. I'm not crazy confident in the number necessarily, just because, like you said, the West has a lot of strong teams this year. If they were in the East, I'd say over 55 would be an easy one. But even in the West, they're in their division. They're going to win that division. They're going to hit over. They're going to top 52 wins. So 51.5, I'm taking the over easy. So we're down to those 8. We've finished those. We each got a wild card pick. One team that we wanted to discuss, we were going through, that we wanted to pick out and give you our picks individually. So Taylor, who is your wild card play, and are you on the over or the under for him?
So this is pretty scary to pick, but I'm going to go out on a limb and take the Chicago Bulls over. They're listed at 30.5 wins, which I thought was a little bit aggressive. They haven't even cracked 30 in each of the last 2 seasons, but I do think they've quietly gotten better this offseason. They have an interesting young core already in place. Zach LaVine kind of came on last season as a potential number 1 offensive option. I think Lauri Markkanen is one of the more underrated young players in the entire league. Kobe White was a fine draft pick, I think. But late last season, they added Otto Porter, and he was great after he arrived there. This offseason, they've signed Thaddeus Young and Tomas Satoransky. I think those are decent veteran depth signings. Wendell Carter Jr. was one of the better young rookies last season. He kind of struggled with injuries, but I think he has a bright future. This team just has a lot of talent. And again, the bottom of the Eastern Conference is so barren that I think there are some just guaranteed built-in wins there. They won 22 games last season with no continuity. They fired their coach halfway through the season. Another year of LaVine and Markkanen together. Markkanen actually missed like the first half of the season as well. I think they trade Chris Dunn for some added quality depth. I just think the Bulls could sneak into a playoff spot, and I think obviously to do that, they have to win more than 30 games. So I'll take the over on Chicago's 30.5.
A bold prediction, and you know what? Kudos to you for making a bold pick. I'm taking an obvious one. The New York Knicks are listed as an over-under 27.5 wins. For me, I'm betting heavy on the under. New York was 17-65 last season. They hoped to get the number 1 pick in this year's draft to get Zion Williamson. They didn't. They traded away the injured Kristaps Porzingis at the trade deadline and hoped to sign up to 2 max contract free agents. They got 0. They were 2-14 in the division a year ago, 11-41 against the East, 6-24 against the West. They're not going to be 500 against the Atlantic this year. I don't see them being much better against other Eastern Conference teams. And they might actually end up being worse against the West this year in those head-to-head games. So I don't see how the Knicks top 22 wins this year, much less get up to 28 or above. This was an obvious one to me. This has to be driven because of the fact that the Knicks play in New York. You've got to have fans that are going, no, I think we're going to be okay. They're not. That's an obvious one to me. Don't want to be like, hey, bet the house, because someone will take that literally, and I don't want you to bet your mortgage. But bet your betting billfold on it. That's avoid betting on Golden State, avoid betting on Toronto and their over/under. Take the Knicks under. I think that was an obvious one, but
it's a good one. There's plenty of merit behind that, I would say.
Oh yeah, the Knicks to get to 28 wins. That's no. They might, like I said, they might lose 60 this year. But that'll do it for this NBA betting picks and tips video. Let us know your thoughts on what teams you think are locks to go over or under their projected win totals in the comments below. Are you a Knicks fan and upset that I think your team's going to lose 60 games this year? I think I'm just trying to bring you a little bit of realism. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the Odds On Favorites YouTube channel for more NBA content like this. He's Taylor Smith. I'm Drew Goldfarb. I'm from New York, so don't blame me too much for picking against the Knicks. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.